Gracias, señor Zalatan. Thank you, Mr. Zalatan. Now we have a question coming in by phone from the University, from Renanco, Córdoba, Argentina. A lot of interference. El sonido, por favor. Buenos días, buenos días. Good morning. This is Susana Bolaños from the City Hall, from Huinca, Renanco, Córdoba, Argentina. We would like to know how this City Hall, this municipality, can motivate its inhabitants, the inhabitants of the city, to improve the quality standards that will make the companies come closer to ISO 9000. Thank you very much.
Well, usually where this starts has got to come from the top executives in the administration. They have got to want this, and they have got to understand how this can help them become a better organization. In my experience, I have found if there is not this desire at the top levels of the organization to want to pursue this path of quality improvement and developing a quality system, it cannot be successful. So really it must start at the top levels of the organization, and they must be committed to it and must want it to happen and make it a part of the strategy for the organization.
Now we have another call coming in from Argentina as well, from the Institute Nobel Rio Tercero. Thank you. We are calling from Rio Tercero, Córdoba, Argentina. The question: what investment do companies need to make in order to put in place a system, a quality assurance system, and what are the causes most likely and most common when they implement these norms, the failure causes most likely to happen when they're implementing ISO 9000?
That is a very good and very difficult question. You first need to assess, it's very difficult to say how much investment and how much cost, because every company is at a different stage of development in terms of their operating procedures. So the first thing that I look at when I go in to help a company is where they are today. What procedures do they have? How far have they gone in documenting their procedures and training their people in the proper ways to conduct the business? So the investment can vary significantly depending upon the starting point. Some companies are more mature in the development of their procedures and their processes, and some companies are really still at the beginning and have very little in place. So it's not an easy question to answer. Typically, ISO implementations for companies that have very little in place can range from 6 months to a year of intensive effort. And the companies that I have worked with have not added any resources to accomplish ISO, but there is a lot of strain and a lot of hard work with the existing resources to make it happen. So there has to be a commitment and priority given to the effort, and it's not easy.
Now we would like to greet and welcome our participants from Mexico, Tamaulipas, Mexico, Tampico. Adelante. Good afternoon. I understand that there is a new standard ISO, especially for hospital, hotels, etc. When do you know this? When do you think this will be edited and published? As far as ISO 14000, if that is, I want to know whether that one is based on an ecological balance.
There is a standard in development for service organizations that has been in development for many years. Unfortunately, the ISO committee sometimes doesn't streamline its own processes and takes many years to actually release some of these documents. You have to realize there are many, many countries involved in the development of these standards, and they have to all now come into agreement before something is released. So it is quite a bureaucratic process for a standard actually to get through the entire committee and approved by all the various nations. So I do believe that this standard will be released in the near future. As far as the environmental standard, that has not actually been released yet officially. But many companies have gotten drafts of the environmental standard and are starting to work towards implementing the standard in their companies. And I do not claim to be an expert on the environmental standard. We have a speaker in our series who is. But from what I've read and learned about the standard, it really does look like it's a very, very common sense approach to environmental management, just like ISO 9000 is a very, very common sense approach to quality management, and ask that you have the basic environmental procedures in place to assure that you are not harming the environment, which is something that we all desire.
We would like to welcome Brazil, and now we have the University Gama Filho from Rio de Janeiro.
Aqui é o professor Alexandre Stolano da Universidade Gama Filho. Here's Professor Alexandre Stolano from the Universidade Gama Filho. My question is, having multiple level customers like a university, I mean, you have the students, we have the society as a whole, and you have the customers or organizations that employ our students. How to put all these multi-level customers into a quality system like ISO 9000?
Well, I recently worked with the university, and it has been the first university, as far as we know, in the world to be certified. We really, in this particular case of the university that I work with, we looked at the customers being our students, the students being the ultimate customer, and everything we did, as far as our procedures and efforts and energy, were focused at the ultimate customer, which in most universities' case is the student. There may be some other associations with various organizations, but the ultimate customer that really that needs to be focused on is that student. And so we really put most of our focus on the student. I don't know if this answers your question, but really you need to, when you examine these multi-level customers, you have to say, where is the real customer? And the real customer that you're delivering the service to and that you need to satisfy is the student, in the case of a university.
And now we have another question from Mexico State, from the University from Cuautitlán. Adelante. Thank you. What opportunity do companies in the third world companies have to implement ISO 9000, and how much are they behind for not having, how much of a disadvantage are they when they don't have technology to apply, when they don't have any technology available?
Well, to implement, let me first try to address the technology question. ISO does not have any requirements that any particular technology be in place. Really it talks about documenting your systems, your basic systems, like how you process a contract, how you manufacture your product, how you design your products. It doesn't require that any technology be in place. Obviously, companies that are further along in technology have advantages, but ISO does not require any technology to be in place. As far as a disadvantage of third world countries, I think the real basic question here is if you want to compete in a global environment, and many third world companies in third world countries are successful in competing in the global environment, you must get your quality system up to the level of at least a minimum level that ISO 9000 requires. This is any company that desires to compete in the global environment, whether it be a third world country or whether it be a company in the United States or in another very developed country, must at least maintain and sustain these minimum quality standards that ISO 9000 requires. It's now becoming almost a mandatory requirement to do business internationally.
Now we welcome Panama with the following question. Good morning. Our question is as follows. Could we consider these standards as a protection measure used by the most industrialized countries in order for them to protect their companies? Thank you.
I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but if your question is this possibly if I interpret your question as possibly being something that industrialized countries are doing to maybe put other countries that aren't as advanced at a competitive disadvantage, I truly do not believe that that is the intent of the ISO 9000 committee. I truly believe that the range of countries, as you saw the map of the countries that have bought in to the ISO standard, there's been participation from all of the industrialized world, including many diverse countries and cultures. So this has been a unanimous worldwide buy-in of the standard by, again, a very diverse group of cultures. So I believe there is no intent here to exclude anyone. I think the intent here is to share and allow everyone to understand what is required for a good, common sense, basic quality system, and help companies provide guidelines to companies and make these guidelines international, so that there's not all these conflicting different national standards. So I think the intent has been to make it simpler and to make it and make this information much more accessible to countries around the world. So if anything, it has helped, I believe, third world countries understand what they're going to need to do to compete against the industrialized world.
Nuestro cordial saludo ahora para los participantes de la Universidad Autónoma de Aguascalientes.
Now we welcome Aguascalientes, Universidad de Aguascalientes. Good morning. If a company already has ISO 9000 certification and would like to certify under ISO 14000, what would it need to do? Could you have both certifications? What would happen with the toxic wastes in that case?
Well, they are two totally independent standards. I do believe that a company that already has gone through the process of being certified to ISO 9000 has a lot of good discipline in place that will help them achieve the environmental standards or the ISO 14000 requirements. But they are independent, and what is intended will be that there will be a separate certification awarded for ISO 14000. So it is completely separate from ISO 9000, but there is some relationship in terms of the kinds of discipline and documentation and procedures that will be required. So a company that has achieved ISO 9000 understands how to put these kinds of processes in place, and will have an advantage when as it approaches the ISO 14000 standard.
Now we have another participant from Mexico, from the Federal District. This is coming from the Federal Commission of Electricity, Mexico DF. Good morning. If total quality has something to do with ISO 9000, is it possible for a person who does not live in quality or act in quality, can it really offer a quality service or a quality good?
I look at this as an opportunity for those companies that have not really at this point in time embraced quality or implemented quality system within their company. Here is a wonderful opportunity to now to make a great leap forward and use this ISO 9000 to as guidelines to begin the process to start making it happen within their companies. I truly believe that this must be viewed as an opportunity for those companies that have not yet embraced the quality culture within their business. Take these guidelines and just start making it happen.
Saludamos ahora a Bolivia.
We welcome Bolivia now, participation from the private university, Bolivian Private University, Cochabamba. The company I work for is right now has been implementing this norm for 2 years now, and we are inching ahead, and of course we understand that the qualities of this norm, of this standard. First question, we would like to know what kind of literature you have available, publications, magazines in general, that would complement the text of this norm, of this standard. That's the question.
There are, if you are familiar with organizations such as the American Society for Quality Control, they publish much literature on ISO 9000, guides in helping you implement ISO 9000, guides in helping you set up audit systems. That is one resource, the American Society for Quality Control, where you can obtain literature and but I truly believe that the best approach is to network with companies that have already achieved certification, learn from them, benchmark with them, share with them. Sometimes it's also a great advantage to bring someone like myself that has been through the process to come in and help guide and coach and train. That's always a very effective way versus trying to read it out of a book. I think if you can talk to people that have really been through it, get their knowledge, share, I think that to me is the best approach.
Nuestro saludo para los participantes en la bella villa, la ciudad de Medellín, Colombia. Nos llaman de la Federación Nacional
This is from Colombia, Medellin, Colombia. Good morning. Our question is the following. In the countries, in the developing countries, companies have a great obstacle, and the major one is to find agencies that would certify ISO 9000 at that reasonable cost for them. Could you mention which ones are the most prestigious ones and which ones are the ones that cost the least in order to access them? Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not in the business of representing these various auditing agencies, and my guidance there is that these agencies all basically, the ones that are widely recognized, all basically their fees are very, very close. They basically charge based on the complexity of the company and the time that's going to be involved on their part to examine the company's processes. And what my experience has been, when you get quotes from various agencies, they all come within very, very close range. So it's not usually the cost that's going to be the issue. They're all going to be roughly comparable cost-wise. What you really need to look at is the international stature and recognition of the agency. There are many. I'm fearful for naming names because I probably will leave some out. But there are agencies such as Lloyd's, which is internationally recognized, that is based in England. Det Norsk Veritas, based in Norway. The British Standards Institute, which is based in England, the United Kingdom. These are all, highly reputable, internationally recognized agencies. There are many. There are hundreds of agencies now that are qualified to certify. One of the guidances I always give people that are embarking on this journey is typically, one of the reasons they're embarking on the journey is that they're getting some pressure, typically from customers, to get certified. So many times I advise them to go to their customers and say, of all these agencies, are there any particular agencies that you recognize and that you feel are credible? And use that input from your customers to help guide you in the selection of an agency. I would like to add that the selection of a certifying agency is a very, very critical step in the process, in that this is a long-term partnership. You will be dealing with this agency for a minimum of 3 years, because that typically is the contract that you will sign with an agency for a minimum of a 3-year period. And so it is a long-term relationship, and it's a decision that needs to be taken with great care and great consideration, and look at all the available options, and meet with the agency's lead auditors, and make sure that you feel comfortable with their approach and their mannerisms and their techniques. So it is an extensive process. You need to look at all the options, interview the various agencies, interview their key people, and find the agency that is right for your particular needs.
Ahora retornamos a México. La participación es para el Instituto Tecnológico.
Now we're going back to Mexico. This is Tepic Nayarit. Good morning. The question is the following. In our country, more than 95% of our companies are micro-enterprises and small enterprises, which means that our companies here have very small administrative structures, or very deficient procedures, working procedures. So the question is, what difficulties do you feel that implementing ISO 9000 presents, and what strategies or mechanisms do you think we can adopt in order to counteract these difficulties?
Well, first of all, again, in my particular experience in consulting with many, many small companies, I find that it is actually much easier to implement ISO 9000 in a small company. Typically, you don't have the problems of bureaucracy and problems of communication and many, many functional organizations and many, many levels of bureaucracy that you have in the larger companies. So small companies are much more focused and much easier to deal with, and usually, again, as I have mentioned, if there is commitment and a priority given to the effort, it is a relatively, I won't say easy, but it's a relatively straightforward task to documenting a small company's procedures and implementing ISO 9000. I've done, in many recent examples of small companies that I've worked with, we've started with basically very little, started with nothing, and implemented companies in a matter of 4 to 6 months.
Regresamos ahora a Argentina.
Now we go back to Argentina, and we are welcoming University El Salvador in Argentina. Good morning. Buenos días. I would like to also, you have already answered the question, but I think Panama just said something about, and I would like to reiterate that, whether this globalized system of quality and commerce I wonder if that hasn't influenced really. This is something we speak a lot about in Argentina in these circles, that at some points it becomes an obstacle when it comes to exporting products of the other countries, in other words, to the main countries, or the industrialized countries, maybe. So this has something to do with what Panama mentioned. And I would like to know why it is that the United States keeps this process of globalization of the standard, a certain lag or a certain amount of companies in the not as many U.S. companies have a certification as they do in Europe. So in Europe, they have more companies certified and not so much in the U.S.
Well, in answer to your question, and it's a very good question. In Europe, we have to remember that the standard really was started in Europe. The European community was the first body of nations to embrace the standard, so they've got a head start on the rest of the world. But I would like to say that the rest of the world is catching up very rapidly. Right now, in the United States, there are over 9,000 certified ISO 9000 certified companies, and the rate of certification now is over 250 companies a month. So the United States is rapidly catching up with Europe, and I think the realization has come to companies in the United States that are competing internationally that this is even though it is not a mandatory requirement, it is certainly, it can be an obstacle, as you say. If you are not certified, this can be an obstacle to doing business internationally. And I've said this over and over again in these conferences that there is no country in the world where this is a mandatory requirement, but it's sort of an unwritten mandatory requirement. In other words, you will be, if you are competing against a company that is ISO certified, the ISO certified company will likely get the business. So it is to your advantage to not allow this to be a way that other companies can get an advantage over you. You must take this differentiation away and make it an even playing field by getting certified. That is the best thing you can do is levelize the playing field, go after the certification, because that's the way. I mean, in the future, even more so than today, it's going to be more and more of a requirement as more and more companies and countries buy into this concept of quality.
We continue with Rio de Janeiro.
¿Escuchamos?
Río de Janeiro, lo estamos escuchando.
Hello?
Sí, adelante, pregunte.
See, what is the effects of the ISOs to improve the relationship between employers and employees? There will be any employees in the future, and what it means managers compromising is only an agreement or an active participation and relationship in the conduction of this process?
Excellent, very good question. What I have seen, and in my experience, which I would like to share with you, is that companies that have implemented ISO 9000 now have the executive management and the management of the company now involved in the system. In many cases, ISO requires that management be involved in assuring that the quality system is effective, that it is being followed, and that people have been trained. So I think this is a help to all employees, because ISO requires that employees be trained, that the system is effective, that the employees that the processes are capable. So when companies go after ISO 9000, there's a much more of awareness of what does it take to truly establish capable processes and get people trained, and so that they understand their jobs and that they're involved in the system. So I think ISO helps this relationship between management and employees, because many times prior to ISO there is a disconnect. The employees are experiencing a lot of problems with the quality system, but it doesn't get communicated to executive management. So they're down there trying to make things happen without the support of management. ISO requires that management get involved and assure that the system is effective. So I think in this case it helps that employees, and it helps management, and it really truly helps provide teamwork between employees and management. It will not solve all of your problems, but it will help.
Now we're going back to Mexico with the Technological Institute from Celaya, Guanajuato, Mexico. Muchas gracias. Buenos días. Question is, do you know what year the new revision of ISO 9000 will be published or released, and what is the tendency, what is the trend And what are the most significant changes that you know are going to happen?
Very good question. As many of you know, the original ISO standard was released in 1987. There was a revision in 1994 release that was, I would call, not a very, very major revision. It added a few unique extra requirements, but it was not a major revision. It added some things like preventive maintenance. That was probably one of the most significant features that was added, and more of a prevention focus on, instead of just looking at corrective action, looking more at also preventive actions. But it was not a major revision. The ISO committee has been working very, very long and hard at a much more extensive revision. And originally it was predicted that this would be released in 1997. I do not believe that that will happen. From my own experience with these committees, it will probably take longer than 1997 for this new revision to be released. But the trend is that there will be more of a focus on more of a customer focus in the standard. Right now, it is possible to be certified and not really truly have you know, I would call a product that is meeting the needs of your customers. Let me try to explain what I mean by that. ISO requires that you have a good corrective action system in place, that if you do have customer problems, that these problems are fed back and resolved. So in theory, you could have a lousy product and be certified as long as you have a good corrective action system in place that takes these customer problems and then fixes them. You can achieve ISO certification. So the trend is going to be for more of a focus on are your products actually satisfying customer needs and assuring that you have measurements in place that customers are being satisfied. And there also will be, in the revision of the standard, from what I've seen, more of an emphasis on some of the cultural aspects of quality that are not currently in the standard, some of the continuous improvement and teaming activities which are so essential to long-term quality improvement. So those would be the trends, more of a customer focus and more of a focus on continuous improvement, where the standard would actually require you to be able to demonstrate continuous improvement trends over time.
Now we're going back to Mexico, to the university in Mexico. Good morning. Question is, how easy is it for the supplier to understand its commitment to ISO 9000 if the client is already applying it? Thank you.
I'm not sure I understand your question. Well, if you are dealing with suppliers and you are an ISO certified company, your suppliers do not have to be ISO certified unless you make this a requirement yourself. You do need to have controls to assure that you have controls to control the quality of product that you are receiving from your suppliers, but they themselves do not have to be certified to the standard. So I'm not sure I understand your question.
Sí, parece que ya cortó la llamada. Bueno, nos vamos ahora a Monterrey, Nuevo León, a la Comisión
We're going to Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. Buenos días. The question is the following. Is there a company that generates electricity that is ISO 9000 certified?
That is an industry that I am personally not that familiar with, but I can assure you with the more than 80,000 companies worldwide now that have been certified, that there are probably many, many companies that generate electricity that have gone through the process. But I myself, I cannot give you any specific names of companies. There are directories of companies that have been certified that are published that you can get access to.
Thank you, Mr. Zalatan. Let us continue with the second question and answer session, in which you will explain how to manage the implementation of a quality improvement plan.
As we have discussed, the ISO 9000 guidelines provide an excellent foundation for continuous improvement. And there is great value to the ISO standards, but they must not be treated as an end in themselves.